The transport of life. Welcome to the flipped notes on the blood unit. Be a pretty short unit, so do your notes as homework. Those are old results. Camp Cardio and Camp Neuro. You can apply for those. Short little quiz you can take on your own. So the functions of blood. Blood, it is mainly to transport nutrients, gases, wastes, and other products, hormones, etc., throughout the body from one cell to the other. You eat, it gets digested, all that stuff gets transported by the blood to every single cell in your body. Except for the cornea, that goes through the vitreous or aqueous humor, but that's another story. It helps regulate blood pH and osmosis, blood pressure. The maintenance of body temperature. You know that already. You open the superficial blood vessels, smooth muscles open those up, and you release more heat to the air. Protection against foreign substances, because within the blood, you've got antibodies, which are immunoglobulins. You've got complement components and various other of your immune system components. And clot formation. In case you should get cut, it stops. It's an amazing process. It's a multi-stepped, amazing process where it clots only at the cut, but it regulates itself so it does not clot throughout the whole body. Otherwise, you'd be dead the first time you cut. Just a simply amazing process. So blood is a connective tissue. Why is blood connective tissue? Because it connects the body to itself. Air, we breathe in the lungs. All that oxygen is transported by the red blood cells, the erythrocytes, to all the cells in the body. Food, again, waste products from the cells back to the kidney. 55% roughly of your blood is plasma. That is the fluid portion. When you spin the blood down into centrifuge, as in the test tube behind you, it shows plasma is the yellow fluid portion at top. It's mostly water, but it does have proteins in it, which help with stuff I'll talk about later, and about 2% other components. Then you get that about 45% of the what they call the formed elements. That is your solid materials, your white blood cells, red blood cells, thrombocytes, platelets. Blood connects gases and nutrients and everything else. Plasma proteins. Okay, now we're going to talk about these. Within the plasma, we have albumin, which is the same as egg white, the protein in eggs, chicken eggs. And that mainly helps maintain the osmotic pressure of the blood, along with sodium chloride. You know, if you get a lot of sodium in your body, blood pressure goes up. So if you eat a lot of sodium chloride, table salt, your blood pressure is going to go up for a while till the kidneys decide to get rid of that extra sodium. Globulins. If it ends in IN, like albumin and globulin, it's a protein. Immunoglobulins are the globulins which we call antibodies. And when talk about antibodies, they talk about IgA, IgM. The Ig stands for immunoglobulin. So if people talk about your immunoglobulins, they're talking about antibodies. There's also other proteins that carry things. And fibrinogen. Anytime you hear the word ogen or the suffix ogen at the end of something, it means it's an inactive precursor. So fibrinogen is in every drop of your blood. It's an inactive precursor for fibrin. Fibrin makes a Spider-Man clot. Sticks like crazy. If we were to accidentally turn fibrinogen into fibrin right now, you'd throw a clot and you could have a stroke, a heart attack, or just die from clotting your whole blood up. So fibrinogen is only activated when you have a cut and at the surface. It's got a lot of checks and balances. It keeps it from clotting the rest of your body so you don't throw a clot and get a stroke or a heart attack. So the formed elements, we have the white blood cells called the leukocytes. We have the platelets called the thrombocytes, because thrombus means clot. And red blood cells called erythrocytes. Erythro means white. Cyte means cell. Notice red blood cells, they don't have a nucleus. They're these little biconcave disc. And their main job is to carry oxygen. Carbon dioxide is dissolved within the plasma in the form of carbonic acid, mainly. Okay, the formed elements, the thrombocytes. They are a very small fraction of the blood, yet you can see them, the little arrows pointing the tiniest parts there. They're basically pieces that broke off of a big megakaryocyte, a big cell, and they just float around in there. But when we get a clot, they're activated to where they become sticky and they stick to the fibrinogen and help make a nice little nature band-aid. Leukocytes, or white blood cells, form roughly 5% of the formed elements. You can see in the slide that those leukocytes as white blood cells make up more than 5% of the slide. That's because that came from someone with leukemia, which is white blood cell cancer. And there you can see you see 3 neutrophils, the most common white blood cell. They have this funny looking nucleus. You have, looks like a basophil there. You have a couple of monocytes. That might even be macrophages, monocytes, macrophages, some different types of white blood cells. And then you got a bunch of little erythrocytes. And they aid in fighting infection. Each one has its different role, which we'll find about in a little bit. Erythrocytes, they are your red blood cells. They're 95% of the formed elements. I mean, you look at a slide, you see a lot of red, pink cells floating around. No nucleus, they're anucleate. And they're biconcave shape. I think I said that before. They're roughly 40 to 55% of the total blood volume. If you get a high hematocrit, a lot of red blood cells, your blood gets thicker. It's not as fluid. Runners, they build that up. They go to the mountains, run high altitudes to build that up so they can go further, so the blood grabs more oxygen from the air, gives them an advantage in running. Anucleate means no nucleus. Iron in the hemoglobin binds the oxygen. So the hemoglobin is obviously globin. It's one of your proteins, but it's what helps make up the surface of the erythrocyte. And the iron, there's an iron molecule right smack dab in the middle of each globin molecule called hemoglobin. That's what makes it red, because iron, rust, when it gets oxygen, it turns bright red. So in this picture, matter of fact, the letters that make up erythrocytes to enucleate, those are all kind of a burgundy red, a darker red. That's what lowly oxygenated blood looks like from your veins. Highly oxygenated blood looks more like the words in iron and hemoglobin. It's brighter red. It's a fallacy that blood is blue. It is not blue. It looks blue because the collagen in our skin diffracts the light, just as the water in the sky diffracts the sun's light and makes it blue, because water is not blue. So there's your hemoglobin molecule. There's the heme molecule stuck in there, which has iron, and oxygen binds really tight to that. The bad news is, not here yet. The bad news is carbon monoxide binds tighter to that than oxygen. So even if you're warming your car up in the garage and the door is open, you're still at danger. Hemoglobin mainly carries oxygen. Only 23%, that's 1/5 of all carbon dioxide, sticks to the hemoglobin. Most of carbon dioxide, most of it is dissolved in plasma as carbonic acid. So your body your brain doesn't really notice low oxygen. What it does notice is a drop in pH of the blood. When the blood pH lowers because of carbonic acid, it makes you breathe harder. And that gets more of that CO2 moved out of the lungs, more oxygen moved in, and keeps you oxygenated. So look, picture down there, oxyhemoglobin, bright red. Deoxyhemoglobin, dark red. The color it is in the little tubes when they take it out of your vein, that's pretty much the color of venous blood, as opposed to arterial blood, which is bright red. All right, gas exchange from the alveoli in the lungs. We haven't learned about alveoli yet, but they're the millions of little tiny, simple squamous sacs that make up the lungs, make it spongy. Capillaries surround these like crazy, and gas diffuses from the high to low concentration. The alveoli, where the air comes in, is going to be higher in oxygen than CO2, so the CO2 will diffuse from the capillaries, from the blood in the capillaries, into the lungs. The oxygen is lower in concentration on the red blood cells because now they're coming around from the body. They got a lot of CO2 on it, but not much oxygen, so oxygen diffuses from the lungs into the capillaries and sticks to the red blood cells. Yes, I did this on paint. Don't make fun of it. So here's a picture I stole because someone didn't use paint. They used a nice thing. So it's a CO2 in, oxygen in. You breathe it all in. CO2 makes less than 1% of the air, though. And you can see it's diffusing in the middle there. And normal oxygenation, bright red, a lot of CO2. Oh, Oh, that's a CO. Yeah, carbon monoxide binds tighter. There it is. Carbon monoxide binds 210 times stronger to the hemoglobin than does oxygen. So do not warm your car up with the garage door open. Even if you're out there thinking, door's open, no. Stay away from that exhaust pipe. Nutrients also diffuse across the simple squamous epithelial blood into the tissues, and that fluid is called interstitial between tissues fluid, and that dissolves in and feeds the tissues. Likewise, as I say below, cell wastes from cells, they undergo glycolysis and they give off waste that diffuses from their high concentration back into the blood, and then they're filtered out in the kidneys. The blood bathes the tissues with nutrients and feeds them. How does that fluid return to the blood? In the background, you see artery blood, arterial blood coming from the heart, venous blood coming from the body back to the heart. In between, you got this thing called lymphatic vessels. The lymph tissue, your lymph, is closely associated with the blood vessels. It's attached. When you remove your skeletal muscles, they squeeze that lymph fluid, that interstitial fluid, which has been absorbed back in the lymph, they squeeze that back into the venous return in the veins. So if you're a couch potato and you sit a long time, you get cankles. Your ankles start swelling up because you're sitting. You're not getting up and moving around. The skeletal muscle helps squeeze that fluid from the lymph back in the blood. All right, blood typing. Red blood cells are super simple. An antigen is any protein, polysaccharide, peptidoglycolipid, any compound that's on the outside of the cell that can be seen, any structure. Red cells have either an A, we call A antigen, or B antigen, big ones. If you have both, you're type AB blood. If you don't have any, you're O. I don't have either A or B, I'm type O. So if you give me blood from an A, a B, or an AB person, I see that all as being foreign, my body attacks it. I can only take from type O. So my antibodies, I have antibodies against type A and type B. How these come about, we're still not certain, but they happen about the first year of development outside the uterus. And our body somehow decides, okay, these are not good. If you have type AB blood, you recognize A and B as both being part of yourself, so you have no antibodies against those. You don't attack those. If you want to learn more about this and practice it more, it's a pretty simple concept. You can go to, there's antibodies clotting up against antibodies B clotting up with type A. You can go to a website I have here coming up soon. That's what agglutinated blood cells look like. Agglutinated means to clump, and that's not good. If that happens, it forms a clot and you die by a stroke or heart attack because your blood shouldn't clot on you. So don't take blood from anybody you don't know from. That's why hospitals check, double check, and triple check the blood. And that's what it looks like under a scope when it agglutinates or clumps. Use those sites after they agglutinated with antibodies. So we're going to do labs. Hemolytic disease of the newborn is when the mom first has a child. If that child has a different red blood cell type as hers, and it has an antigen, either A or B, that she does not have, at parturition, at birth, she gets exposed to that, and she starts making antibodies against that. So the first child, no problem. But now she has antibodies. The second child, if it has the type of blood the mom doesn't have, then her antibodies will cross the placenta and attack the baby. So the baby will, okay, I don't have the picture anymore. The picture's pretty gruesome. Babies come out looking pretty blotched if they survive. So that's not a good thing. I guess, according to my loud speaker, class is about ready to start, so I'm cutting this off now. Here is the website you can go to practice your blood types, and this is part 1 of blood unit notes.